I'm Emily, and this is a tale that nearly shattered my existence. It's peculiar how quickly life can spin out of control, unexpectedly, and how a person you deeply trust can turn into someone who seems utterly unfamiliar. It began quite innocently. Really, my husband David and I had been together for 8 years, enjoying a lovely home, successful careers, and our cherished golden retriever Buddy, who was practically our child. However, every relationship encounters challenges, and ours was no exception. We remained together, yet emotionally, we were worlds apart. David often worked late, leaving me feeling overlooked and invisible, as though I was fading away within my own walls. I didn't grasp how exposed I was until Tom appeared more prominently in my life. Tom, a longtime friend of David and a regular at our home, had been intertwined with our lives for many years. He and David would play basketball together, and often the three of us would dine together, discussing everything from personal lives to sports to our careers over time. Tom and I began to connect differently. It wasn't deliberate at first. We would joke, laugh perhaps a bit too much at each other's quips, and gradually I found myself eagerly anticipating Tom's visits. What started as innocent chats soon turned deeper, where we shared personal frustrations and confessions. Before I realized it, I was disclosing thoughts to Tom that I hadn't even shared with David. I must confess the attention Tom gave me was flattering. Tom noticed the subtle changes, my latest hairstyle, the way I arranged my outfit's details that David had long ceased to acknowledge. It felt refreshing to be acknowledged, to feel valued again. Yet I never anticipated anything more would develop from it. Or so I convinced myself then. One particular evening, the dynamic shifted. It was a routine Friday. David was detained at work once more, and Tom stopped by to assist with some home repairs. Buddy was thrilled as usual, his tail wagging his barks, joyful upon Tom's entrance. Everything seemed standard, but there was an unusual spark in the air between Tom and me that night. It showed in his smile, the accidental touch of his hand against mine. As he passed a tool, we chuckled while mending a kitchen cabinet. Yet a palpable tension was brewing initially. Subtle. This tension grew unmistakably present after finishing the repairs. We settled on the sofa, Buddy snuggled between us as we watched a nondescript television program. The atmosphere was charged heavy with the anticipation that something was about to unfold. Yet neither Tom nor I seemed ready to initiate anything. And then it occurred. It's hard to articulate precisely how, but one moment we were just sitting, and the next Tom reached out, placing his hand over mine. His touch was neither aggressive nor merely friendly. It was something deeper, more profound. I knew I should have withdrawn, stood up, and asked him to leave, but I remained motionless. The contact sent a chill through me, and for an instant I lost sight of any potential repercussions. My rational thoughts faded away, overwhelmed by the sensation of his hand against mine. Buddy, resting at our feet, stirred slightly, but remained calm, almost as though he could sense the tension in the air. But then reality came crashing down. I heard the front door unlocking, my heart leaping as David entered. Oblivious to the scene he had just interrupted, Tom quickly withdrew his hand, and I sprang up from the couch, my face burning with guilt. It all unfolded so rapidly, yet the air was so tense, it felt as though it could be sliced with a knife. Hey, I'm home," David announced nonchalantly, dropping his keys on the table. "What's going on?" "Nothing," I responded hastily, my voice unnaturally high-pitched. "We were just watching TV." Tom stood up as well, his discomfort matching mine. "Yeah, I was just leaving," he muttered, avoiding David's gaze. David didn't seem to pick up on the strained atmosphere, or perhaps he was simply too exhausted to notice. He moved towards Buddy, petting him. And for a moment I believed we might be safe, that perhaps David hadn't detected anything, and this incident could just fade away without ever being mentioned again. Yet deep inside, I knew that was not the reality. Something had irreversibly changed between Tom and me. We hadn't crossed any physical boundaries, but emotionally we were teetering on the brink, and the fear of what might happen next was overwhelming. That as Tom left that evening, he cast a glance my way, a look that conveyed he was just as affected as I was. It was clear this situation was far from resolved in the days that followed. I was engulfed in a haze of confusion and remorse. Thoughts of Tom lingered constantly, his touch, his presence, and how he noticed me, yet every recollection brought a surge of guilt. David had done nothing to deserve this. He was a good husband, albeit distracted and weary, but he certainly didn't deserve to be betrayed. I tried to dismiss it all as a fleeting lapse, nothing more. But no matter how much I wanted to forget, Tom was always there in some way. He would send casual texts, asking how I was, or about Buddy's antics. His messages weren't overly flirtatious, but the implication was UN instable. He too hadn't forgotten that night. I knew I should have ignored his messages, but I didn't. The truth was I relished the attention, and that realization only intensified my self-loathing. Each time I responded, I felt as though I was flirting with disaster, yet I found myself unable to stop. Eventually, everything came to a boiling point one evening, that when David suggested we invite Tom over for dinner, mentioning it had been too long since we last gathered as a trio, I couldn't object without arousing in suspicion. So I forced a smile and acted as if all was normal, though internally I was in turmoil. The dinner felt excruciatingly awkward, at least to me. David and Tom chatted away as usual, laughing, discussing sports, and exchanging work anecdotes, while I struggled to maintain my composure. Every glance from Tom seemed to penetrate my facade, and every smile from David made me feel increasingly guilty. After we finished eating, we transitioned to the living room. Buddy, following close behind Tom, settled onto the couch, and I paused, ensuring I maintained a clear gap between us. As I sat down, David remained in the kitchen, cleaning up, blissfully unaware of the tension simmering between Tom and me. Then in a moment I'll always remember, Buddy hopped up onto the couch, positioning himself between Tom and me. Just like the previous night, he wagged his tail, clueless to the emotional turmoil around him. Tom laughed and reached out to pet him, and for a brief moment his hand brushed against mine once more. It felt like a replay of that other night. But this time I withdrew my hand immediately, my heart racing. I could no longer bear it. Rising abruptly, I startled both Tom and Buddy. "I'm going to help David in the kitchen," I announced, my voice trembling. I needed an escape. The walls seemed to be closing in, and I felt suffocated by the weight of my guilt. Tom said nothing, merely nodding, his expression inscrutable in the kitchen. David was drying dishes, humming softly, completely oblivious to the emotional turmoil just beyond observing him. My guilt overwhelmed me like a tidal wave. This was all so wrong. "Hey, can I talk to you?" I whispered, my voice faltering. David turned, his smile vanishing when he noticed my distraught expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. I hesitated, torn. Should I confess everything and risk losing him forever? But facing his concerned gaze, I realized I couldn't shatter his world. Not this way. The truth would devastate him, and I wasn't prepared for that fallout. "Nothing," I lied, forcing a smile. "I've just been feeling a bit off lately. Work been stressful." David visibly relaxed, his relief palpable. You can talk to me about anything, right?" He reassured me, drawing me into a hug. His embrace felt like a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink. In that moment, I resolved to end whatever was developing with Tom. I couldn't continue to flirt with danger. risking everything for a fleeting thrill. But fate had other ideas the next day. I messaged Tom, insisting we needed to speak. I was determined to end it, refusing to jeopardize my marriage for a transient attraction. He agreed to meet, but suggested he come over when David was out, a lapse in judgment on my part. I conceded, but I agreed when Tom arrived. Buddy greeted him with his usual exuberance. Unaware of the strained atmosphere, I led Tom into the living room, intent on having a serious discussion to set boundaries and terminate the stalling. But Tom had different intentions as we sat. He leaned in, his gaze intense. "Emily, I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed in a low, fervent tone. My heart skipped, but I remained resolute. "Tom, this is wrong. We can't do this." "I love David, I know," he replied, reaching for my hand again. "But I can't help how I feel." I withdrew my hand, standing to create distance. "This has to stop. We can't keep doing this." I insisted. Tom stood as well, his frustration evident. "Emily, you feel it too, I know you do." Before I could reply, the sound of the front door unlocking jolted us. David was home unexpectedly. Tom froze, his expression one of sheer panic. Buddy's barks echoed from the hallway as David entered. My heart raced as I faced the impending confrontation. David's cheerful demeanor darkened to confusion and suspicion. "As he saw us, what's going on?" David asked, his tone cautious yet sharp. I was speechless, the guilt paralyzing Tom. Attempting to diffuse the situation, spoke. Haste, "I was just leaving," came by to check on Buddy. David's gaze, narrowed, skepticism written all over his face. "Why would you need to check on Buddy when Emily's here?" The room fell silent, and in that moment, I understood that some actions are irreversible, no matter how much we wish otherwise. If you enjoyed my story, please like the video and subscribe my channel for more stories.